The night her blood pressure spiked to stroke territory, the chief resident who walked through her labor and delivery door was the one man who'd watched her marriage burn from the inside and never said a word. The fluorescent hum of Mercy General's maternity wing felt too bright, too sterile for 3 in the morning. Claire pressed her palm against the cool metal bed rail, anchoring herself against the dizziness that had sent her stumbling into the ER 2 hours earlier. The antiseptic smell mixed with something warmer, lavender from the diffuser the nurse had plugged in. But it did nothing to settle the tightness in her chest. No partner to call, no family close enough to make the hour-long trip before dawn. Just her, 34 weeks pregnant, and a headache that felt like her skull was splitting open from the inside. The triage nurse had taken one look at her swollen ankles and blurred vision and called for backup. Now she waited, hospital gown scratchy against her skin, monitoring cuff squeezing her arm every 5 minutes. The baby kicked, sharp, insistent, and Claire whispered to her belly, "I know, sweetheart. I know this isn't the plan." Nothing about the past year had been the plan. The door opened without a knock. Claire expected the attending physician she'd met earlier, Morrison, silver-haired and calm. But the man who entered wore the same white coat over surgical scrubs, stethoscope draped around his neck like a badge of authority. Tall, dark-haired, with the kind of focused intensity that made nurses step aside in hallways. She knew that face. She'd seen it across Thanksgiving tables and at a wedding rehearsal she'd rather forget. "Claire?" His voice was careful, professional. "I'm Dr. Callahan, chief resident on call tonight." Her throat closed. Owen Callahan, her ex-husband's younger brother. The quiet one who'd sat at the edge of family dinners, watching everything, saying nothing. The one who'd been finishing his residency in another state when her marriage to Marcus imploded 18 months ago. When the lies, the late nights, the lipstick on a shirt collar had finally shattered the illusion she'd tried so hard to protect. Owen crossed to the monitor, eyes scanning her vitals with clinical detachment. "Your BP, your urine, severe headache, visual disturbances." He didn't meet her gaze. "You're showing signs of preeclampsia." "I know what preeclampsia is." Her voice came out sharper than intended. "Then you know we need to act fast." He pulled a pen light from his pocket, leaned in close. "Look at the light. Don't move your head." She forced herself still as he checked her pupils, his face inches from up close. She could see the exhaustion etched around his eyes, probably the tail end of a long shift. His jaw was tighter than she remembered, a muscle jumping near his temple. "When did the headache start?" he asked, stepping back. 2 days ago. I thought it was stress." Something flickered across his expression, almost like guilt. Some tightening. Owen made a note on the tablet clipped to her bed. "We're going to run labs, start magnesium sulfate to prevent seizures, and monitor you closely. If your pressure doesn't stabilize, we may need to induce labor or proceed to C-section. I'm only 34 weeks. I'm aware." His tone softened a fraction. "But if we can't control the preeclampsia, the risk to you and the baby increases exponentially. We're talking stroke, kidney failure, placental abruption." "I get it." She cut him off, hands instinctively cradling her. "You're saying we might not have a choice." "We always have choices." He met her eyes for the first time since entering the room, and she saw the weight behind the words. "But sometimes the window narrows faster than we'd like." A nurse appeared in the doorway, young, efficient, already prepping an IV kit. "Labs are ordered, Dr. Callahan. Magnesium's ready to hang." "Thank you, Jenna." Owen stepped aside to let her work, but didn't leave. He stood at the foot of Claire's bed, one hand on the rail, watching the monitor like it held answers to questions he wasn't asking out loud. Claire's pulse hammered in her ears, louder than the fetal heart rate beeping steadily from the machine. "Does your family know I'm here?" The muscle in his jaw tightened again. "No." "Good." She closed her eyes as Jenna slid the IV needle home. "Keep it that way." Owen waited until the nurse left before pulling up a stool beside the bed. Not close, professional distance maintained, but close enough that his voice could drop below the hum of machinery. I need to be transparent about something, he said. Hospital protocol requires that if there's a personal relationship between attending staff and patient, we disclose it. I can request another physician take over your case. Claire's eyes flew open. In the middle of the night, with my blood pressure through the roof? Dr. Morrison is still on the floor, or I can page Dr. Hendricks. She's excellent with high-risk OB. And how long would that take? To brief someone new, get them up to speed? Owen's silence was answer enough. She exhaled slowly, forcing her shoulders down from where they'd crept up near her ears. We're not family anymore. You're not my brother-in-law. Marcus made sure of that when he served me divorce papers via courier while I was at work. The bitterness leaked through despite her best efforts. So unless there's some ethics rule about treating your brother's ex-wife, I don't see the problem. There isn't a rule. Owen's gaze held steady. But there is a complication. Marcus still lists me as his emergency contact. If something happens to you, then he doesn't need to know. Her voice came out harder than stone. I'm the patient. I make the decisions. And I'm telling you, don't call him. Claire? He didn't want this baby. The words burned coming up. He made that clear in the settlement negotiations. He signed away parental rights before she was even born. So unless you plan to violate patient confidentiality, he doesn't get a vote. Owen leaned back, scrubbing a hand over his face. When he looked at her again, something had shifted, a crack in the professional armor. I need you to understand something. If your condition deteriorates, if we end up in an OR making split-second calls about your life or the baby's, I can't let personal history cloud my judgment. You think I'd want you to? I think... He stopped, choosing words carefully. I think there are things that were never said. Things I should have said 18 months ago. And if we're going to do this, if I'm going to be your doctor through what could be a complicated delivery, we need to acknowledge that elephant twisted in the thin hospital blanket. You mean the fact that you sat at that rehearsal dinner and watched him toast our future while his mistress was texting him under the table? Owen flinched. Barely perceptible, but she caught it. I didn't know, he said quietly. Not until after. But I knew something was wrong. And His voice roughened. I should have pulled you aside. Should have asked. Instead, I convinced myself it wasn't my place. The monitor notch. So here's the arrangement, Claire said, meeting his eyes with steel in her own. You keep me and this baby alive. You do your job like you would for any other patient in this bed, and when it's over, when we're both stable and safe, you walk away with a clear conscience knowing you did the one thing your family seems incapable of, showing up when it matters. Owen stood, adjusting his stethoscope with hands that weren't quite steady. That's the plan. Good. She turned her head toward the window where dawn was just starting to bruise the horizon. Then we have a deal. By 6 a.m., the maternity floor had shifted from night quiet to morning chaos. Nurses changed shifts with efficient handoffs. Breakfast carts rattled down hallways, and somewhere 3 doors down, a baby's first cry announced a successful delivery. Claire tried to sleep between blood pressure checks, but every footstep outside her door made her pulse. Appeared again at 7:30, this time with Dr. Morrison in tow, the attending physician whose shift technically owned Claire's case. Morrison had the calm authority of someone who'd delivered 1,000 babies and seen every complication the textbooks forgot to mention. Labs came back, Morrison said, scanning the chart on his tablet. Liver enzymes elevated, platelets dropping. We're looking at HELLP syndrome on top of the preeclampsia. Claire's medical knowledge, scraped together from pregnancy forums and too many late-night Google searches, translated the acronym into something terrifying. Hemolysis, elevated liver enzymes, low platelet count. The dangerous escalation that meant her body was actively breaking down. Owen's face remained professionally neutral, but his fingers tightened on the edge of the tablet he carried. Timeline? We need to deliver within 24 hours, Morrison said. 48 at the outside. The longer we wait, the higher the risk of seizure, liver rupture, or stroke. I'm only 34 weeks, Claire repeated, hating how her voice shook. She's too early. Morrison pulled up a stool, his silver hair catching the overhead light. The NICU here is excellent. At 34 weeks, survival rate is over 95%. Most babies do well with some respiratory support initially. He paused. But if we don't deliver soon, we're risking both of you. A knock interrupted, sharp, authoritative. The door opened before anyone answered, and a woman in designer scrubs swept in, name badge reading Dr. Helena Vance, department head. Behind her trailed 2 residents and a medical student, all clutching tablets like shields. Morning rounds, Vance announced, then stopped short when she saw Owen. Callahan, I didn't realize you were on this case. Chief resident on call last night, he replied evenly. Dr. Morrison asked me to stay on for continuity. Vance's eyes flicked to Claire, then back to Owen, calculating. And the patient is Claire Brennan, Morrison supplied. 34 weeks, severe preeclampsia progressing to Hell P. We're planning induction or C-section within the next 12 to 24 hours. Family notified? Vance asked. The room went still. Owen met Claire's gaze across the bed. A split second of silent communication. No immediate family, I'm here alone. One of the residents, young, eager, oblivious, leaned in to check the monitor. What about the father? Usually we like to have support people present for high-risk deliveries. Not available, Owen cut in, voice firm enough to shut down further questions. Ms. Brennan has made her wishes clear regarding contact notifications. Vance's perfectly shaped eyebrow rose a fraction. And you're comfortable remaining on this case, Dr. Callahan? No conflicts of interest. The air in the room thickened. Morrison glanced between them, clearly sensing something unspoken. The residents shifted, uncomfortable with the sudden tension. Owen straightened to his full height, shoulders back, every inch the confident chief resident who ran trauma codes and made life-or-death calls in the middle of the night. No conflict. Ms. Brennan is my patient. I'm committed to providing the best possible care. Good smile didn't reach her eyes. Because this is exactly the kind of case that ends up in peer review if anything goes wrong. I'll be checking in regularly. She turned to Morrison. Page me when you're ready to proceed with delivery. I want to be present. She swept out with her entourage, leaving a wake of uncertainty. Morrison exhaled slowly. Well, that was subtle. Owen's jaw worked. She's protective of the department's reputation. Can't blame her. What I can blame her for, Morrison said dryly, is forgetting that the patient in the bed has ears. He looked at Claire with something like kindness. You okay? Claire forced her breathing steady, willing her blood pressure not to spike again. I'm okay. Liar, Morrison said, but gently. Look, hospital politics aside, you're in good hands. Owen's one of the best residents I've trained. If he says he can do this, so do I, Claire said, surprising herself with how much she meant it just for a moment, before the professional mask slid back into place. Let's get through the next 12 hours, one step at a time. A text alert buzzed on his phone. He glanced at it, and something dark crossed his face before he pocketed the device without responding. Problem? Morrison asked. Nothing urgent, Owen lied. And Claire knew, the way you know things about people you've watched across family tables, that it was definitely urgent, and probably had Marcus's name attached to it. By noon, Claire's room had become a monitoring station. The magnesium drip made her feel sluggish, overheated, like moving through water. Owen checked in every 2 hours, sometimes with Morrison, sometimes alone, his presence becoming a strange constant in the fluorescent-lit. The decision point arrived at 1:15 p.m. Blood pressure's not responding to medication, Owen said, reviewing the latest readings. We've given it 6 hours. I think we need to move toward delivery. Morrison nodded, already pulling up the surgical schedule on his tablet. Or availability. That's the problem. Owen's expression tightened. We have 3 emergency C-sections already in progress. Trauma from a car accident came in an hour ago. Pregnant mother, critical condition. They're using OR2, standard delivery complications in OR4, and Dr. Vance is in OR1 with twins who decided to arrive 6 weeks early. So we're looking at minimum 3-hour wait, maybe 4. Claire's hands went cold despite the magnesium heat. What happens if we wait 4 hours and my pressure keeps climbing? The two doctors exchanged a look that said more than words. Then we induce, Morrison said. Try for vaginal delivery. Help. Longer process, more stress on your system. But it's what we do when surgical options aren't available. Owen pulled up a stool, positioning himself where Claire could see his face clearly. Here's what I need you to understand. Induction at 34 weeks with your platelet count dropping means we're watching for hemorrhage, seizure, and fetal distress simultaneously. That's a long time to maintain control when your body's already compromised. And the alternative is waiting for an OR that might not open up in time. Claire's voice came out steadier than she felt. So we're stuck. We're adapting, Owen corrected. If we induce now, I stay with you through the entire process. Continuous monitoring, immediate response if anything changes. The NICU team is already prepped for a 34-weeker. Morrison's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned. Vance wants an update, I'll handle her. He stood, squeezing Claire's shoulder briefly before heading for the door. You're in good hands. Owen doesn't lose patience. The door clicked shut, leaving them alone. Claire studied Owen's face, the exhaustion carved deeper now, but his eyes still sharp, still focused. When was the last time you slept? Irrelevant. It's relevant if you're about to spend the next 18 hours keeping me alive. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. I've pulled longer shifts, and before you ask, yes, I'm cleared to continue. No, I'm not handing you off. He adjusted the fetal monitor, checking the baby's heart rate with practiced efficiency. She's strong, good variability, fighting spirit. She gets that from me. I don't doubt it. Owen's hand stilled on the monitor, and for a moment, the professional distance cracked. Marcus used to complain that you were too stubborn. He said that to you? Family dinner, about 6 months before the wedding. Owen's voice went quiet. He made it sound like a character flaw. I remember thinking. He stopped himself. What? That stubbornness looked a lot like strength from where I sat. He couldn't see the difference. He didn't deserve you. The words landed between them like stones dropped in still water, ripples spreading outward. Before Claire could respond, the door burst open. A nurse, different from Jenna, older with the brisk efficiency of 20 years on the floor, wheeled in a medication cart. Dr. Callahan, Dr. Morrison wants Pitocin started. He's calling it now. We're inducing. Owen's expression shifted back to clinical focus. See where we're starting. The next hour blurred into a rhythm of contractions building, monitors beeping, Owen's calm voice guiding her through each wave. The Pitocin drip made the contractions sharper, more insistent. Claire gripped the bed rails, breathing through the pain while Owen tracked her pressure every 15 minutes. You're at 3 centimeters, he said after the second check, moving faster than expected. Is that good? It's progress. He marked something on her chart. But we need to watch for... The monitor's alarm shrieked. Claire's blood pressure spiked to 180 over 115. Owen moved with surgical precision, hitting the call button, adjusting her position to left side, checking the IV lines. Claire, look at me. Deep breaths. We're okay. But his face said one prepping an emergency medication kit while the other rechecked the monitors. Owen's hands were steady as he drew up a dose of hydralazine, but Claire saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw locked when he injected the medication into her IV port. BP's dropping, one nurse confirmed. 175 over 110, 170 over 108. The alarm silenced. Owen exhaled, still monitoring the numbers. What just happened? Claire's voice shook. Hypertensive crisis. Your body's reacting to the stress of labor. He pulled up a stool again, this time sitting close enough that she could feel the steadiness radiating from him. We've got it under control, but this is why I need to... Any sign of another spike, and we make immediate decisions, even if that means field delivery without an OR. Field delivery? Here, in this room, with whatever resources we have available. His eyes held hers. I won't let you seize Claire, whatever it takes. She believed him. By 6 p.m., Claire was at 5 centimeters and her room had become a command center. Owen had claimed the chair beside her bed, laptop balanced on one knee, splitting attention between her vitals and coordinating with the NICU team via encrypted messages. The Pitocin drip had been adjusted 3 times, walking the knife's edge between progressing labor and spiking her pressure again. Morrison appeared every hour, checking progress, conferring with Owen in low voices just outside the door. Claire heard fragments. Platelet count dropping. Or might open up by 8. Prepare for hemorrhage protocols. The contractions were relentless now. Claire focused on the breathing techniques she'd practiced alone in her apartment, the ones she'd imagined doing with a partner who'd vanished long before the baby was real enough to need a nursery. Next contraction in 30 seconds, Owen warned, eyes on the monitor. Remember, slow breath in through your nose, out through your mouth, and crested, a wave that threatened to pull her under. Claire heard herself making sounds she didn't recognize. Animal, desperate. Owen's hand found hers on the bed rail. Warm, solid, anchoring. You're doing great, he said quietly. 6 more like that, and we check again. I can't. The words stuck in her throat. You can. You are. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, barely perceptible, probably unconscious. I've got you. Something about the gesture, the simple human contact after hours of clinical touch, cracked open the wall she'd been holding up. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes, hot and unwelcome. I'm sorry, she managed between contractions. This wasn't. Stop. Owen shifted closer, still holding her hand. You don't apologize for being human. I'm supposed to be strong. You've been strong for 18 months. You drove yourself to the hospital at 3 a.m. with preeclampsia because you didn't have anyone to call. You're facing a high-risk delivery alone because the man who should be here chose to walk away. His voice roughened. That's not weakness, Claire. That's survival. Another contraction built. Owen watched the monitor, coaching her through it with a steadiness that felt like the only solid thing in the room. When it passed, Claire slumped back against the pillows, exhausted. Why are you being so kind to me? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He was quiet for a moment, still holding her hand, thumb still moving in that absent rhythm. Because 18 months ago, he said finally, I sat at that rehearsal dinner and watched you smile through Marcus's toast. I saw the way you touched his arm trying to connect, and the way he pulled away to check his phone. I saw you pretending everything was fine while the whole family pretended not to notice. He swallowed hard. And I went home that night and told myself it wasn't my business, that families are complicated and marriages are private, and I was just the kid brother who didn't understand the full picture. But I did understand, Owen continued. I understood that you deserved better, that you deserved someone who showed up, who saw you, who didn't make you carry everything alone. His eyes met hers, raw with something that looked like old guilt. I should have said something then. I can't fix that, but I can show up now. The monitor beeped, a contraction starting to build. Owen, Claire started, but the pain swallowed the words. He moved through it with her, hand steady in hers, voice calm at her cervix again with clinical detachment that somehow didn't erase the intimacy of what he'd just confessed. 7 centimeters, he said. We're in the home stretch, interrupted the moment. Dr. Vance swept in, scrubs pristine despite the long day, trademark tablet in hand. She took one look at Claire's monitor readings and frowned. Why are we not in an OR? Because there isn't one available, Owen replied evenly, and the patient is progressing well with induction. Patient is also 1 seizure away from a catastrophic outcome. Vance crossed her arms. I want Dr. Morrison's assessment. OR1, they had complications. Then I'm making the call. Vance pulled out her phone. I'm contacting Dr. Chen to take over this case. She's fresh, hasn't been on shift for 16 hours, and doesn't have... She paused, gaze flicking any potential conflicts that could compromise judgment. The room went cold. Claire found her voice, sharp and clear despite the exhaustion. No. Vance blinked. I said no, Dr. Callahan is my doctor. I'm not consenting to a transfer. Ms. Brennan, this isn't a matter of preference. Actually, it is. Claire pushed herself more upright, ignoring the dizziness. I'm a competent adult making medical decisions for myself and my baby. Unless you're declaring me mentally unfit, I have the right to choose my care provider, and I choose Dr. Callahan. Vance's expression hardened. You're being emotional. I'm being clear. Claire's voice cut like a scalpel. He's been with me for 15 hours. He knows my case inside and out. My body is already stressed. Bringing in someone new not reduces it. So unless you have a medical reason beyond politics, the answer is no. Owen looked at her with something that might have been awe. Vance's jaw, but I'm documenting this. And if anything goes wrong, then it's on me, Claire said. Not him. The department head left without another word, door closing with controlled force. Owen exhaled slowly. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Claire squeezed his hand. You showed up when it mattered. That's worth fighting for. The monitor beeped again, another contraction building. But this time, when the pain crested, Claire wasn't facing it alone. By 10 p.m., the kept trying to hide the exhaustion. Owen had stepped out once, 15 minutes to gulp coffee and brief the night shift, but returned to find her gripping the bed rails so hard her knuckles had gone white. 8 centimeters, he said after the next check. Almost there. How much longer? Her voice was ragged. Could be an hour. Could be 3. A particularly brutal. Owen was there instantly, adjusting her position, checking the baby's heart rate, murmuring reassurances that barely penetrated the pain. When it passed, she collapsed back, trembling. Tell me something, anything. I need to think about something else. Owen hesitated, then reached into his scrubs pocket. He pulled out a small object, worn smooth at the edges, a St. Christopher medal on a tarnished silver chain. You remember my dad's funeral? He asked quietly. Claire nodded. She'd attended with Marcus back when they were newlyweds and family obligations still mattered. Owen's father, a police officer killed in the line of duty, had been buried with full honors. He wore this every shift, Owen continued, rubbing his thumb over the medal. Said it kept him safe. After he died, Mom gave it to Marcus. He was the oldest. It was supposed to be this passing of the torch thing. I remember he'd seen it once in Marcus's dresser drawer, buried under socks. Marcus wore it exactly twice. Said it was old-fashioned. That he didn't need luck charms to succeed. Owen's jaw, he said no. Said it was his, that Dad left it to him. And just because I was in med school didn't make me special. Claire's heart ached at the old wound in his voice. 3 days before you and Marcus got married, I went to the house when I knew he'd be at work. I told Mom I needed to pick up something I'd left there. Owen looked at the medal in his palm. I went through his dresser, found it under a stack of gym clothes, took it. Owen. I know. It was stealing from my brother. But I couldn't. His voice cracked. I couldn't watch him disrespect the one thing Dad left us that mattered. So I took it, and I've worn it every shift since I started residency. He fastened the chain around Claire's wrist, the metal resting cool against her pulse. For luck, he said softly. Because you and this baby, you deserve all the protection I can give. Claire stared at the metal, tears streaming silently. Your brother hates you for this, doesn't he? He doesn't know. I doubt he even remembers Dad left it to him. Owen's smile was sad. That's the thing about Marcus. He only values what he loses. Everything else is just background noise. Another contraction built, but this time Claire focused on the weight of the metal, the tangible proof that someone had chosen to show up, to care, to give something precious when nothing was required. Thank you, she whispered when she could speak again. Owen just squeezed her hand. Midnight arrived with the sound of rain hammering against the hospital windows. The storm had rolled in fast, the kind of late autumn tempest that turned roads into rivers and knocked out power in half the county. The hospital's backup generators hummed to life, and somewhere down the hall, someone's IV pump started beeping an alarm. Claire was at 9 centimeters, fully effaced, transition stage hitting like a freight train. The pain had evolved past anything she could breathe through. It consumed her, pulled her under, made her forget there had ever been a time before this moment. "I can't do this," she gasped between contractions. "Owen, I can't." "You are doing it." He was right there, one hand on her shoulder, the other checking the monitor. "Baby's heart rate is perfect. You're almost there." "Something's wrong. I feel—" She couldn't articulate it. A pressure, a wrongness, something shifting inside that felt like tearing. Owen's expression changed. He checked between her legs and she saw his shoulders tense. "What?" Claire's panic spiked. "What's wrong?" "The baby's presenting occiput posterior, sunny side up." He kept his voice calm, but she heard the concern underneath. "That's why the back labor is so intense. She's facing the wrong way." "Is she okay?" "But posterior babies take longer to deliver, and with your platelets dropping—" He checked the latest lab results on his tablet and something dark crossed his face. "We're at borderline for hemorrhage risk." Morrison appeared in the doorway, rain-spotted scrubs suggesting he'd been called in from outside. "Status?" 9 centimeters OP presentation, platelets at 85,000 and falling. Owen rattled off numbers like weapons. "We need an OR, now." Still no availability. The trauma case developed complications. They're in hour 4 of a repair. Twins are in NICU, but Vance is dealing with the mother's postpartum hemorrhage. Morrison scrubbed a hand over his wet hair. "Storm knocked out power to 3 blocks. We're getting overflow from County General's diversions. So we deliver here." Owen's voice left no room for argument. "I need the full hemorrhage kit, extra suction, and the NICU team on standby outside this door. If she seizes or bleeds out, we're not going to have time to move her." Morrison hesitated only a second. "Make it happen." The next hour blurred into organized chaos. Nurses transformed Claire's room into a makeshift delivery suite. Crash cart in the corner, sterile packs torn open, instruments laid out with surgical precision. Owen gowned and gloved, never leaving her side, while Morrison coordinated with the NICU team via phone. "Next contraction, I need you to push," Owen said, positioned between her legs with the focused intensity of a surgeon. "Not until I say. Wait for it." The pain crested, and Claire pushed with everything she had left. The pressure was immense, splitting, impossible. "Stop. Breathe." Owen's hands worked carefully, trying to manually rotate the baby. "She's stuck on the pubic bone. I need to turn her." Claire sobbed. I can't do this." "Yes, you can." Owen looked up, and the raw emotion in his eyes cut through her panic. "I've spent 18 months regretting that I didn't fight for you when it mattered. I'm not making that mistake again. You're going to deliver this baby safely, and I'm going to make sure of it. Do you trust me?" The question hung between them. Not about medicine, but about everything that had come before. "Yes," Claire whispered. "Then push." She bore down with everything she had and felt something shift, the baby turning, Owen's hands guiding, coaxing, refusing to give up. When the contraction passed, he was smiling. "She's rotated. Occiput anterior. We're in position." "Thank God." Claire collapsed back, shaking. 2 more pushes. Maybe 3. That's all. Owen adjusted his grip. "Ready. On the next one, give me against the windows." The lights flickered once, backup generators straining, and in that moment, with a storm raging outside and a baby fighting to be born, Claire understood something she'd missed at that rehearsal dinner 18 months ago. Owen hadn't been silent out of indifference. He'd been watching, cataloging, carrying the weight of truths he didn't know how to speak. He'd been the one person who saw her struggling and regretted not acting. Now, he was the monitor's automated voice. "Owen." The baby crowned at 1:47 a.m. Owen's hands guided her head through, careful and sure, while Morrison stood ready with suction. One more push, and the shoulders cleared. Then suddenly, gloriously, she was out. Slippery and purple and wailing with outraged lungs that filled the room with sound. "It's a girl," Owen said unnecessarily, his voice thick with emotion. He placed her on Claire's chest, skin to skin, while the NICU team hovered nearby with warmed blankets. Claire's hands shook as she cradled her daughter. Impossibly small, impossibly perfect. "Hi, sweetheart. Hi, baby girl." The moment lasted exactly 45 seconds. Then the bleeding started. Owen saw it first. Too much blood, too fast, pooling on the delivery pad. His expression shifted instantly from joy to combat-ready focus. "Hemorrhage. Morrison. On it." Morrison hit the call button. "I need the hemorrhage cart now." Owen's hands worked fast, delivering the placenta, checking for tears, applying pressure. But the bleeding didn't stop. Claire felt the warmth spreading beneath her, felt the room tilt sideways as her vision grayed at the edges. "Claire, stay with me." Owen's voice cut through the fog. "Look at your baby. Keep your eyes open." But the exhaustion was so heavy, and the pain had faded into a strange floating sensation that felt almost peaceful. Nurses swarmed the room. Someone took the baby. Claire heard her crying, wanted to protest, but couldn't make her mouth work. An oxygen mask appeared on her face. IV bags hung above her, fluids pouring in. "BP dropping," someone called. 90 over 60, 85 over 55. "Uterotonic agents aren't working. I need to pack the..." Owen's hands pressed into her abdomen, hard, painful, dragging her back from the edge. "Claire, I know this hurts, but I need you to stay conscious. Talk to me. Tell me about your baby." "She's beautiful." The words came out slurred. "What are you going to name her?" Claire's mind swam. She'd picked a name months ago, written it in her journal, imagined whispering it for the first time. Sophia means wisdom. Sophia. Owen's voice wavered, just for a second. "That's perfect. Sophia needs her mom to fight right now. Can you do that? Lying isn't good enough." His hands kept working, packing gauze, applying pressure, refusing to let her slip away. "I need you to be as stubborn as you were when you stood up to Vance. Remember that? You told the department head to back off because you knew what you needed. That's who you are, Claire. You're a fighter, so fight." The bleeding slowed, marginally. Not enough. Morrison appeared at Owen's shoulder, voice low. "We need surgical intervention. Full OR, possible hysterectomy if we can't get control." "The storm. I know, but we don't have a choice." Owen's jaw set. "Then we move her. Right now." They transferred Claire to a gurney. Every jostle sent fresh waves of blood. The hallway was chaos, someone shouting about OR3 finally being available. Owen ran alongside the gurney, one hand keeping pressure on her abdomen, the other holding her wrist where his father's medal still rested. They burst through the OR doors at 2:14 a.m. Surgical lights blazed overhead. The anesthesiologist appeared, prepping Claire for general anesthesia while Owen scrubbed in. "Wait." Claire grabbed his sleeve with the last of her strength. "If something happens, if you have to choose, stop." Owen leaned close, eyes fierce behind his mask. "I'm not choosing. You're both surviving this, end of discussion. But if, no ifs, you're going to wake up and you're going to hold Sophia, and you're going to be the mother she deserves. That's the only outcome I'm accepting." The anesthesiologist placed the mask over Claire's face. "Count backwards from 10. 10, 9. Her eyes locked on Owen's. "Thank you for showing up. Always," he said. And those were the last words she heard before the darkness took her. Claire woke to white ceiling tiles and the sound of machines beeping in steady rhythm. Her body felt hollow, scooped out and stitched back together. The pain was distant, held at bay by whatever was dripping through her IV, but present enough that she knew she'd survived something catastrophic. "Easy." A woman's voice. Not Owen. The nurse from before, Jenna, appeared in her field of vision. "You're in recovery. Surgery went well. Don't try to move yet. My baby." Claire's voice came out as a croak. "NICU. She's doing great. 4 pounds, 12 ounces, breathing on her own with just a little oxygen support." Jenna adjusted something on the IV pole. "Dr. Callahan's with her now. He hasn't left her side except to check on you." The relief should have been overwhelming, but all Claire felt was a cold dread settling in her chest. What time is it? Just after 9 a.m. You've been out for almost 7 hours. 7 hours. The surgery had taken 7 hours. Morrison appeared in the doorway looking exhausted but relieved. Welcome back. You gave us quite a scare. What happened? Uterine atony complicated by placenta accreta. We had to do a partial hysterectomy to control the bleeding. He said it gently, but the words still hit like a physical blow. You lost about 2 liters of blood. Required transfusion. But you're stable now, and the prognosis is excellent. Claire processed this slowly. No more children. The door closed on a future she hadn't even known she wanted until it was gone. Does Owen know? He was there. He assisted through the whole surgery. Morrison pulled up a chair. Claire, I need you to understand something. Without his intervention, his decision to pack the uterus immediately, his refusal to wait for an OR, you would have bled out in that delivery room. He saved your life. The words shot a crushing wave of realization. Owen had been forced to make impossible choices because she'd refused to let anyone else take over. Because she'd dug in her heels, convinced she needed him there. Where is he? NICU, but Morrison hesitated. There's something you should know. His brother showed up about an hour ago. Claire's blood went cold. Marcus is here? Apparently someone from the hospital called him, probably Vance. She's been gunning for Owen since this started. Marcus is claiming he has a right to know about the baby, that Owen should have notified him immediately. Morrison's expression darkened. It's getting ugly. Hospital administration is involved. But he signed away his rights. I know, but he's making noise about Owen having a conflict of interest, about hospital protocol violations, about the fact that his brother delivered his ex-wife's baby without informing the father. Morrison leaned forward. Claire, this could cost Owen his residency. Vance is building a case for ethics violations. The machines beeped faster as Claire's heart rate climbed. That's insane. I refused the transfer. It was my choice. Which is what Owen's been saying. But Marcus is pushing hard, and he's got family connections on the hospital board. Old money, old power. The kind that makes ethics committees nervous. I need to see him. Owen, I need to see him. Not yet. You're not cleared to move, and the NICU is a zoo right now. Give it a few hours. No. Claire pushed herself upright despite the pain screaming through her abdomen. He fought for me when everyone else walked away. I'm not letting him take the fall for doing the right thing. Morrison studied her for a long moment. You're just as stubborn as he said. Is that a problem? No. A small smile. It's exactly what he needs right now. 30 minutes later, Claire was in a wheelchair being pushed through the NICU corridor by Jenna, against Morrison's better judgment, but with his grudging permission. She wore a fresh hospital gown, had swallowed enough pain medication to make movement possible, and carried a fury that burned hotter than any fever. The NICU waiting area was crowded, worried parents, anxious relatives, and in the corner, a cluster of people in business attire that screamed, "Administration." Marcus Callahan, exactly as Claire remembered. Tall, handsome in the way money polishes, wearing a suit that cost more than her monthly rent. Next to him stood Dr. Vance, tablet in hand, looking grimly satisfied. And across from them, shoulders squared but eyes exhausted, stood Owen. Marcus saw Claire first. His expression cycled through surprise, calculation, and something that might have been guilt before settling on manufactured concern. Claire, I heard about the complications. I'm so sorry. Don't. Her voice cut like a scalpel. Don't you dare pretend you care. I have a right to know when my child is born. She's not your child. Claire's hands gripped the wheelchair arms, knuckles white. You signed a legal document terminating your parental rights. You made it abundantly clear you wanted nothing to do with this pregnancy, so you don't get to show up now and play concerned father. Marcus's lawyer-smooth expression, that's between you and me. What I'm addressing now is the fact that my brother delivered your baby, our baby, without informing me. Despite knowing our family history, despite having a clear conflict of interest. He had a patient with life-threatening preeclampsia who needed immediate care. Would you have preferred he let me die while waiting for hospital politics to sort themselves out? I would have preferred he follow protocol, Vance interjected coolly. Dr. Callahan was given multiple opportunities to request a transfer. He chose not to. That raises questions about judgment and appropriate boundaries. Owen's expression was carved from stone, but Claire saw the defeat in his eyes. He thought he'd lost, thought his career was over because he'd chosen to show up when no one else would. You want to talk about judgment? Claire pushed herself to standing, ignoring Jenna's protest, ignoring the pain that made her vision swim. Let me tell you about judgment. At 3 a.m., when I drove myself to this hospital with blood pressure high enough to cause a stroke, I had no one, no partner, no family, just me and a baby who was in danger because I'd been too proud to ask for help. She took a shaky step forward. Owen Callahan walked into my room and made a choice. Not because it was easy, not because it would look good on his record, but because someone needed to show up, and he was the only one willing to do it. Very touching, Vance said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. But it doesn't change. I'm not finished. Claire's voice cracked like a whip. For 18 months, I've watched this family pretend that betrayal and abandonment are just complicated relationship issues. I've listened to excuses about why no one spoke up, why no one intervened, why everyone just looked the other way while I carried the weight alone. She looked directly at Marcus. You were sleeping with your assistant while we were planning our wedding. You let me stand at that altar and promise forever while you'd already decided I wasn't worth keeping. And when I found out, when the whole careful lie fell apart, you served me divorce papers at work, in front of my colleagues, with a courier. Marcus had the grace to flinch. Your brother was the only person in your entire family who looked at that situation and felt guilty for not doing more, not for what he did, for what he didn't do. Claire's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. So he showed up. When I was alone and terrified and facing a delivery that could have killed me, he stayed. He fought. He made impossible decisions and carried weight that wasn't his responsibility to carry. And now you want to punish him for that? The waiting area had gone silent. Even the administrative staff looked uncomfortable. Ms. Management stepped forward carefully. No one is suggesting Dr. Callahan acted with malicious intent. His liability over patient care. Claire cut him off. I understand you have rules. I understand there are reasons for those rules. But I also understand that sometimes the right choice looks messy on paper, and if you punish people for making the hard right call instead of the easy wrong one, you're going to end up with a hospital full of doctors who protect themselves instead of their patients. She swayed, exhaustion and pain catching up. Owen moved instinctively to steady her, his hands gentle on her elbows. I'm the patient, Claire said, looking directly at Vance. I refused the transfer, multiple times. In front of witnesses. That's documented in the chart, isn't it? Vance's jaw. It is. Then this isn't about protocol violations, it's about punishing someone for making you uncomfortable. Claire's voice dropped, but carried no less weight. My daughter is alive because Owen Callahan refused to give up. I'm alive for the same reason, and if you take his career away for that, you're telling every other resident in this hospital that doing the right thing will cost them everything. She collapsed back into the wheelchair, spent. Jenna was there immediately, checking her pulse, murmuring about getting her back to recovery. But Claire kept her eyes locked on the administration cluster. You want to discipline someone? Discipline the department head who tried to force a patient transfer for political reasons instead of medical ones. You want to review protocol? Review why we have OR wait times that force doctors to make field delivery decisions. But don't you dare punish the one person in this entire building who put a patient's life ahead of his career. The director of risk management exchanged glances with his colleagues. I think we need to review this matter more carefully. Dr. Vance, Dr. Callahan will be in touch after a full investigation. It wasn't vindication, but it was a stay of execution. Vance's expression could have frozen nitrogen. Marcus looked like he'd been slapped, and Owen stared at Claire like she'd just moved mountains. As Jenna wheeled her away, Claire heard Marcus call after them. This isn't over. She didn't bother looking back. They took Claire back to recovery, but Morrison allowed Owen to follow. Professional distance be damned at this point. He pulled up a chair beside her bed, silent, looking more exhausted than she'd ever seen a human being look. "You didn't have to do that," he said finally. "Yes, I did, Claire. You gave me your father's medal. You stayed through a 16-hour labor. You saved my life and my daughter's life." She reached for his hand. "I'm not letting them destroy you for being a decent human being." Owen's thumb traced over the medal. "Marcus is going to fight this. He has connections, resources. So do I." Claire's voice hardened. "I have documentation. The discharge papers from the divorce, the termination of parental rights, signed, notarized, filed with the court, reach him during the pregnancy, and got sent to voicemail. I have the text message he sent 2 months ago telling me he wanted nothing to do with this situation." Owen looked up sharply. "You kept all of that?" "My lawyer told me to. She said men like Marcus, men with money and family name, have a way of rewriting history when it suits them." Claire pulled her phone from the bag Jenna had brought with her belongings. "I have 18 months of receipts. Every OB appointment I went to alone. Every time I paid for baby supplies from my salary while he was posting vacation photos from Bali on Instagram. Every single moment he chose to pretend this baby didn't exist." She pulled up her photo gallery, swiping through screenshots. "Here, stop contacting me about pregnancy stuff. My lawyer says I don't have to engage. Here's another. Just because you decided to keep it doesn't make it my problem." Owen's expression darkened as he read. "He called your baby it. He called her a lot of things. None of them were my daughter." Claire kept scrolling. "I have the emails from his lawyer, outlining the settlement terms, the financial payout in exchange for terminating rights, where he explicitly states he wants no custody, no visitation, no contact of any kind." She looked up. "And I have the voice recording from the mediation session where he told me, on record, that he was dodging a bullet by not being tied to me or the baby." "You recorded that?" "My lawyer did. With everyone's consent. It's legal. We needed documentation in case he tried to come back later and claim he was coerced." Claire's smile was bitter. Turns out she was right to be paranoid. Owen was quiet for a long moment. This could hurt him, professionally, socially. If this gets out, Marcus's reputation as the golden son of the Callahan family falls apart. "Good. Claire. He tried to destroy your career to cover his own tracks. He showed up here in this hospital pretending to be a concerned father so he could paint you as the villain in his story." She met Owen's eyes, unflinching. "I'm done protecting men who don't deserve it. If he wants a fight, I'll give him one, and I'll win." Morrison entered, looking cautiously optimistic. "Hospital Legal just contacted me. They want copies of all documentation related to the pregnancy and divorce. Says it's part of the formal review." "Good. There's a cloud folder. Password is Sophia's birthday, October 20th, 2025. Everything's organized chronologically." Morrison took the phone, scrolling through with increasing interest. "This is comprehensive. I'm a teacher. Organization is literally in my job description." "Former teacher," Owen corrected gently. "You were fired for being pregnant and no longer fitting the school's image." Claire had almost forgotten she'd mentioned that during one of the long night hours. "Yeah, that's documented too, including the email from the principal suggesting I consider my options before the board meeting." Morrison looked between them. "You're building a pattern of conduct case. I'm building a truth case." Claire took her phone back. "Marcus wants to claim Owen violated ethics by treating me? Fine, but the full context includes why I was alone, why I refused a transfer, and why Owen was the only person in that room who gave a damn if I lived or died." "The hospital won't like you airing this publicly," Morrison warned. "The hospital doesn't get a vote." Claire's voice was steel-wrapped in exhaustion. "I'm the patient. These are my medical decisions, my personal history, my story. If administration wants to protect Marcus because his family donates to the building fund, that's their choice. But I'm not staying quiet to make anyone comfortable." Owen squeezed her hand. "You sure about this? Once you start, there's no taking it back. I've never been more sure of anything. Morrison nodded slowly. Okay. I'll forward this to legal and to the ethics committee. And Claire? He paused at the door. I'm glad someone finally called him out. After he left, Owen sat in silence, still holding Claire's hand, still processing. Why? He asked finally. Why fight this hard for me? Because 18 months ago, you were the only person at that rehearsal dinner who looked at me like I was a human being instead of a prop in Marcus's perfect life performance. Claire's voice softened. Because you showed up, because you gave me your father's medal and stayed through the worst night of my life. Because when I needed someone to see me, really see me, you were there. She paused, searching for the right words. And because you deserve to know that being a good person doesn't always cost you everything. Sometimes it saves everything. Owen's eyes were wet. He didn't try to hide it. Thank you, he whispered, always. Claire echoed his earlier promise and felt something settle in her chest, something that felt like the beginning of healing. The ethics committee hearing happened 3 days later in a conference room that smelled of old coffee and anxiety. Claire had been discharged the day before but refused to miss it. She sat in the gallery, still sore, still exhausted, but dressed in real clothes instead of a hospital gown, and carrying a binder thick enough to be used as a... Owen sat at the respondents' table with Morrison beside him as his advocate. Across from them, Dr. Vance looked grimly confident, flanked by her own legal representation. And in the gallery, separated by carefully maintained distance, sat Marcus. He'd brought a lawyer too. Of course he had. The committee chair, a stern woman in her 60s named Dr. Patricia Walsh, called the session to order. We're here to review a complaint filed by Dr. Helena Vance regarding potential ethics violations by Dr. Owen Callahan in his treatment of patient Claire Brennan. Dr. Vance, present your case. Vance stood, tablet in hand, delivering her argument with prosecutorial precision. Conflict of interest, failure to disclose personal relationships, refusal to accept transfer recommendations, each point delivered like a nail in Owen's professional coffin. Dr. Callahan was given multiple opportunities to remove himself from this case, Vance concluded, remaining the primary physician, despite clear personal entanglement, represents a breakdown in professional judgment that this committee cannot ignore. Dr. Walsh nodded. Dr. Callahan, your response? Owen stood, shoulders back, voice steady. I don't dispute the facts as Dr. Vance presented them. I did refuse transfer recommendations, and I remained her primary physician through a complicated delivery. He paused, but I'd like to address the context that Dr. Vance conveniently omitted. He outlined the timeline, the 3 a.m. admission, the rapid progression of preeclampsia, the lack of OR availability, the patient's explicit refusal of transfer. Clinical facts delivered without emotion. At every decision point, I prioritized patient safety over personal comfort. When Ms. Brennan's blood pressure spiked, I intervened immediately. Became complicated, I adapted protocols to address real-time complications. And when she began hemorrhaging, I made the call that saved her life. Owen's voice remained level. If this committee believes that constitutes an ethics violation, then I'll accept that judgment. But I won't apologize for keeping my patient alive. Dr. Walsh made notes on her tablet. Ms. Brennan, you're listed as a witness. Do you wish to speak? Claire stood, binder in hand. I do. Set down the binder with a thump that made everyone jump and looked directly at the committee. My name is Claire Brennan. I'm a 32-year-old former high school English teacher who was fired from my job 7 months into my pregnancy because the school board decided that being a single mother didn't align with their values. She opened the binder. Here's the termination letter, dated March 15, 2025. Note the phrase, considering your circumstances as the stated reason. No performance issues, no misconduct, just pregnancy. She flipped pages. Here's the divorce decree from my marriage to Marcus Callahan. Final date, April 2024. Filed after I discovered he'd been having an affair with his executive assistant for 8 months. 6 of which occurred while we were married. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in the gallery. Here's the termination of parental rights document, signed by Marcus Callahan on February 10, filed with the county clerk. He specifically waived all custody, all visitation, and all parental decision-making in exchange for a financial settlement. She looked up. That settlement, by the way, was $15,000, the cost to buy himself out of fatherhood. She pulled out printed screenshots. Here are text messages from Marcus spanning 6 months, declining to engage with anything pregnancy-related. Stop contacting me. My lawyer will handle it. Not my problem anymore. His words, not mine. The committee members leaned in, examining the evidence. Here's the voice recording from our mediation session. Claire placed her phone on the table, pressed play. Marcus's voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. I'm dodging a bullet here. If Claire wants to keep the baby, that's her choice, but I'm not signing up for 18 years of child support and custody battles. I want out, clean and simple. No contact, no obligations. The lawyer beside him. And you understand this is permanent? Marcus. Yeah, I understand. Best decision I've made. The silence in the room was deafening. Claire continued, voice steady. On October 20th at 3:17 a.m., I drove myself to this hospital with blood pressure of 168/110, severe headache and visual disturbances. I had no partner, no family close by, no one to call. She looked at Owen. Dr. Owen Callahan was the chief resident on call. When he walked into my room, he could have requested a transfer immediately. He had every reason to avoid the complication of treating his ex-sister-in-law. She turned back to the committee. But he didn't. He disclosed the relationship. He gave me options. And when I refused the transfer, when I explicitly stated that I wanted him as my doctor, he honored that choice. Not because it was easy, because it was what the patient needed. Claire pulled out more documentation. Here's the medical record showing I refused transfer at 7 a.m. Here's the second refusal at 1 p.m. documented in front of Dr. Morrison. Here's the third refusal when Dr. Vance attempted to force a transfer at 6 p.m., witnessed by 2 nurses and recorded in my chart. Dr. Walsh studied the documents. Ms. Brennan was clearly competent to make her own medical decisions. She was also emotional and in pain, Vance argued. Not in a position to assess conflict of interest objectively. I was clear-minded enough to know that Dr. Callahan had been with me for 15 hours, that he understood my case completely, that bringing in someone new would add risk, not reduce it. Claire's voice cut through the room. I was also clear-minded enough to recognize that Dr. Vance's concern wasn't about my safety. It was about liability. She wanted to protect the hospital's reputation, even if it meant compromising patient care. That's a serious accusation, Dr. Walsh said. It's a documented fact. Claire pulled out another paper. Here's Dr. Vance's statement to me at 6 p.m. This is exactly the kind of case that ends up in peer review if anything goes wrong. Not if we don't provide optimal care, not if patient safety is compromised, but if anything goes wrong, meaning if it becomes a lawsuit. The committee members exchanged glances. Dr. Callahan fought for me when I had no one else. He stayed through a 16-hour labor. He delivered my daughter safely, and when I started hemorrhaging, when I was minutes from bleeding out, he made the emergency decision that saved my life. Claire's voice strengthened. If you punish him for that, you're sending a message to every resident in this hospital. Protect yourself, not your patients. Cover your liability, not your ethics. Choose politics over people. She looked directly at Marcus. And you're letting someone who abandoned his own child dictate what constitutes appropriate medical care. Marcus stood abruptly. I have rights. No, you don't. Claire's voice was ice. You signed them away. You walked away from your daughter before she was born. You don't get to show up now and pretend you're the injured party. His lawyer put a hand on his arm, murmuring something urgent. Ms. Brennan, Dr. Walsh said carefully, we appreciate your testimony, but this hearing is about Dr. Callahan's conduct, not Mr. Callahan's parental choices. With respect, Doctor, the two are inseparable. Claire closed her binder. The only reason this complaint exists is because Marcus showed up at this hospital and made noise to cover his own guilt. He wanted to rewrite history, to make himself the concerned father who was kept in the dark, instead of the man who abandoned his family and tried to buy his way out of responsibility. She turned to the committee. You want to know about ethics? The most ethical thing Owen Callahan did was show up when everyone else walked away. He carried the weight of decisions that should have been shared but weren't because I had no one. He risked his career to give me the best possible care. And if this hospital punishes that kind of dedication, then you're not protecting ethics. You're protecting egos. She sat down. The room stayed silent. Dr. Walsh looked at her fellow committee members, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, she spoke. Thank you, Ms. Brennan. That was, illuminating. She made more notes. Dr. Vance, do you have anything to add? Vance's expression had gone carefully neutral. No, doctor. Mr. Callahan? Dr. Walsh looked at Marcus. His lawyer whispered urgently. Marcus shook his head, stood, and walked out without another word. Dr. Walsh watched him go, then turned back to Owen. Dr. Callahan, this committee will deliberate and provide a written decision within 48 hours. You're dismissed. The decision came 36 hours later, delivered via email at 9 p.m. on a Friday night. Owen read it 3 times, sitting in his apartment, still in scrubs from a 14-hour shift, before he let himself believe it. After careful review of all documentation and testimony, this committee finds no ethics violation in Dr. Owen Callahan's treatment of patient Claire Brennan. Illicit and repeated refusal of transfer, combined with the urgent medical circumstances and lack of alternative resources, justified Dr. Callahan's continued care. Furthermore, the committee notes that Dr. Callahan's clinical decisions were sound, well-documented, and ultimately life-saving. However, the committee does find concerning evidence regarding the circumstances that led to this complaint. Dr. Helena Vance's attempts to force a patient transfer against explicit patient wishes, prioritizing liability concerns over patient autonomy, represents a significant deviation from patient-centered care principles. Dr. Vance will be required to complete additional training on patient rights and autonomy before resuming departmental leadership duties. Additionally, the committee notes that complaints leveraging family connections or personal grievances to target medical staff will not be tolerated. Any future attempts to weaponize the ethics review process for non-medical purposes will result in formal censure. Owen exhaled, something loosening in his chest that had been wound tight for days. His phone buzzed. Morrison, congratulations, you earned it. Another message, this one from a number he hadn't saved but recognized from the hospital directory. Heard you got cleared. Good, you did the right thing. Jenna. And then, one more. Can you come by? Sophia wants to meet her hero. Claire. The NICU visiting hours were technically over, but the nurse upgraded at Owen's quiet insistence, paid for through channels he'd never admit to, was softly lit, the overhead fluorescence dimmed to something gentle. Claire sat in the rocking chair, Sophia nestled against her chest, skin to skin under a hospital blanket. The baby was still small, would be for a while, but her color was good, her breathing steady without supplemental oxygen. She's beautiful, Owen said from the doorway. Claire looked up and her smile was like dawn breaking. She is. Come meet her properly. He crossed the room carefully, as though sudden movement might shatter the moment. Up close, Sophia was impossibly tiny. Dark hair like her mother's, nose scrunched in concentration even in sleep. Want to hold her? Claire asked. I've been holding babies all week, not as a doctor, as Owen. She shifted, making space. She should know who saved her life. He sat, and Claire transferred Sophia into his arms with the practiced ease of a new mother already becoming confident. The baby stirred, made a tiny sound of protest, then settled against his chest like she'd been doing it forever. Owen felt something crack open in his chest, something protective and terrifying and absolutely necessary. I got the committee's decision, he said quietly. I know. Morrison called me. Claire's hand rested on his shoulder. I'm glad they saw. I should have said something 18 months ago, at that rehearsal dinner, when I saw you trying so hard and him pulling away. Owen looked down at Sophia. I told myself it wasn't my place, that families are complicated, that I didn't have the whole picture. You were trying to respect boundaries. I was taking the easy way out. His thumb stroked Sophia's tiny hand. But I'm not making that mistake again. When something matters, when someone matters, I'm showing up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Claire was quiet for a moment. What does that mean? Owen looked up, meeting her eyes. It means I'd like to be part of your life, yours and Sophia's, not as your doctor, not as your ex-husband's brother, just as someone who shows up. Like a friend? Like whatever you need. He paused, choosing words carefully. I know you've been handling everything alone. I know you don't need someone to save you, but maybe, if you're open to it, you could have someone who shares the weight. Someone who answers calls at 3 a.m. and shows up for pediatrician appointments and remembers to buy diapers when you're too tired to think. Claire's eyes filled with tears. Owen, I'm not asking for anything more than you're ready to give, he continued. I'm just saying, I'm here, for whatever that's worth. Claire reached out, covering his hand where it cradled Sophia's head. It's worth everything. That for a long moment, Owen holding the baby, Claire's hand over his, the three of them forming something that felt like the beginning of a family. Not the traditional kind, not the one anyone would have expected, but real and chosen, and built on the kind of foundation that actually lasts. I have something for you, Claire said, reaching into the bag beside her chair. She pulled out a small box, worn at the edges. I was going to wait, but this feels like the right moment. Owen shifted Sophia carefully, opening the box one-handed. Inside was a key, simple silver attached to a keychain that read, Home. It's small, and the neighborhood's not great, and the heater makes weird noises. But it's where we live, me and Sophia. And if you want to be someone who shows up, I'd like that to include having a key. So you can come over when you're off shift, so you can be there for the 3 a.m. feedings and the diaper changes and the completely ordinary moments that make up a life. Owen's vision blurred. Claire, I'm not asking you to be her father. Marcus already proved that biology doesn't make family. But I'm asking if you want to be someone who matters. Someone who's there. Someone who... Her voice cracked. Someone who chose us when you didn't have to. Owen looked down at Sophia, then back at Claire. I'd like more than I can put into words. Then welcome home, Claire whispered. 3 months later, Owen's apartment lease expired, and he didn't renew it. The official story was that Claire needed help with night feedings, and he had the flexible schedule. The unofficial truth was simpler. He'd found where he belonged. He kept the St. Christopher medal, but now it hung on Sophia's nursery wall. A reminder that protection comes from showing up, not from luck. Marcus never contacted Claire again. The hospital's investigation had made it clear that pushing further would only expose more of his own failings. To a different hospital 6 months later, after her retraining became hospital gossip she couldn't escape. Owen finished his residency with honors, accepting a position in Mercy General's high-risk OB department. Morrison retired the following year, telling anyone who'd listened that Owen Callahan was the best resident he'd ever trained, not because of his clinical skills, but because he understood something most doctors spent decades learning, that medicine isn't about procedures and protocols. It's about showing up for people when they need someone to see them. Claire returned to teaching part-time, finding a school that valued her for her skills, rather than judging her for her She still kept the binder of evidence tucked away in a closet, gathering dust, serving as a reminder that sometimes you have to fight for the truth even when it's exhausting. Sophia grew into a fierce, brilliant little girl who called Owen O, because Owen was too many syllables for a toddler, and absolutely no tolerance for people who didn't keep their promises. First birthday, Owen gave her a children's book about a doctor who never gave up on his patients. Claire cried reading it, because she understood exactly what he was really saying. They never labeled what they were, not officially. Not in the way that required explanations at family gatherings or legal documents. But on Tuesday nights, Owen cooked dinner while Claire did laundry, and Sophia played with blocks on the living room floor. On Saturdays, they went to the park and pretended they weren't a family while being exactly that. On the hard nights, when Sophia was sick or Claire had nightmares about hemorrhaging, or Owen questioned whether he'd made the right call in some emergency case, they showed up for each other. Because that's what family does. Not the one you're born into, but the one you choose, the one you build from late-night deliveries and impossible decisions and the simple, revolutionary act of not walking away when things get hard. Claire kept Owen's father's medal in her jewelry box, planning to give it back someday when the moment felt right. But Owen told her to keep it, said his father would have wanted her to have it, would have recognized the kind of strength that drives yourself to the hospital at 3 a.m., that refuses to quit even when your body's breaking down, that fights for someone else's career even when you're exhausted and scared and barely recovered from surgery. The kind of strength that looks a lot like stubbornness from the outside, but is actually courage wearing a different face. October 20th, they celebrated Sophia's birthday with quiet gratitude, not just for her life, but for the night that taught them both that showing up isn't always heroic or dramatic. Sometimes it's just staying, and sometimes it's making the hard call because someone has to. Sometimes it's holding someone's hand through the pain and refusing to let go. That's what Owen had done. That's what Claire had done for him, and that's what they kept doing day after ordinary day, building something real from the wreckage of what came before. Because in the end, that's what love looks like. Not the fairy tale kind, but the kind that survives storms and shows up at 3 a.m. and chooses you even when choosing you is complicated and messy and doesn't fit anyone's. I see you. I'm here. I'm not leaving. Saves lives. Not just in ORs and delivery rooms, but in living rooms and late-night conversations and all the small moments that add up to a life worth living. What would you have done in Claire's position? Would you have fought for someone who showed up when everyone else walked away? If you enjoyed this story of courage, second chances, and choosing family, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. What moment hit you hardest? Let me know. I read every single one.